Hi everyone, welcome back to the Closer Confession podcast. I'm your hostess Maria, and today's episode is going to be everything you need to know about Good Friday. I feel that this Good Friday hits differently. I don't know if anybody else feels like that, but it's the first Good Friday in my life that I have a very different relationship with God. I have read my Bible. I've been doing my own research. I've been listening to different podcasts, and I've been very curious in learning to find out about God and creating a more intimate and closer relationship with Him. So yeah, last Friday, which was the Catholic Good Friday, I pushed myself to watch The Passion of the Christ, and I don't know if it was a very smart idea because I legit cried for 2 hours straight. Not because it was very brutal. Everything that I watched kind of like insane. But mostly because I knew that what I was watching, it did happen. You know, Jesus went through all this that I'm going to be going over in a little bit. That's what got me. This happened. This is true. And sometimes we wear a cross, we see the cross, and we are so used to it that I think we forget what actually happened, what he actually went through for us. So for me, the sacrifice wasn't just the cross. I think the whole thing started at the Garden of Gethsemane. Is when it was 12 a.m. in the morning, and he went there with a few of his disciples, I think that his close disciples, and he was praying to God to remove this cup from him. And I will explain what that cup means, because she knew what it was going to happen the next day. But he said that, please remove it if you can. Please remove it from my hands, but not my will, yours will be done. And he was in such agony and stress that Mark said he saw like blood coming down his face, like sweat of blood. And that is an actual thing. So doctors can explain this phenomenon as hematidrosis. It's a Greek word, of course. It's when your body is in such agony, stress, that the capillaries around the sweat glands rupture. So you literally sweat out blood. So that did happen. And I feel that that's where his torture started. Like I can only imagine like the stress what he was going through. So yeah, I also want to say that during Jesus' trial, there was 18 violations of the Jewish and Roman laws by the people that convicted him. There was a phenomenon that darkness. There's like 5 different things that happen. And I think that we should go over to understand exactly what happened on Good Friday. So then we have Judas that betrayed him, and the sign was to kiss him. Wherever he kiss, he's the one. Then he got arrested on the spot. His disciples just left, kind of abandoned him. Apart from Peter. Peter kind of like stuck around with the soldiers. But when people recognized him and said, "Oh yeah, you're one of his followers. We've seen you with him," he denied it 3 times. I think we all know about that. So at 1 a.m. in the morning, they took him to Annas. So Annas used to be the highest priest. He wasn't anymore, but he still had authority. And he had a personal reason to destroy Jesus, because there was an incident when Jesus went to one of these temples and they were using it for illegal stuff. So he overturned tables of money changers, and Annas was kind of supervising this money changing, which was illegal. So he had a personal reason to prosecute him and not like him. And just because he cost him money. So what he did is he questioned Jesus about his disciples and his doctrines, which that was illegal by the Hebrew criminal code, because it prohibited making the accuser testify for himself. And he replied to that when he was asked, "I spoke openly to the world, so why do you ask me?" Then they take them to Caiaphas. I hope I'm not murdering like his name, which was Caiaphas and 23 members of the Sanhedrin Assembly. Sanhedrin Assembly. I'm so sorry, I probably destroyed it. And they were all related to Annas, which was illegal to have enemies of the accuser serving as judges. So they're trying to find false witnesses. And the thing is, like, their stories didn't match. Okay, so by the Mosaic law, you need at least 2 matching witnesses' stories in order to convict somebody. And they couldn't find it. Caiaphas asked him if he's the Son of God, and then Jesus said yes, and Caiaphas lost it. He just started ripping his clothes, and he said that he was blasphemy. The soldiers started like beating him and spitting on him and humiliating him. Oh yeah, I forgot to say that Judas was given 30 pieces of silver in exchange to betraying Jesus. And when he saw what was happening to Jesus, he also freaked out and went back. He wanted to give the money to them, and they said, we don't care anymore. All they wanted is to convict him, so nobody wanted the money. He gave the money, and then he actually hung himself. And I found out that the money was used to buy a field to bury foreigners. Anyways, I don't know if that's like a very important detail. So the Sanhedrin cannot execute people because that right was taken away by the Romans. So they decided to bring him to Pontius Pilate, a Roman governor at the time. But he was kind of like involved in other things, money, and other illegal stuff. So he couldn't afford to have another scandal. But blasphemy was not enough for him to convict Jesus. So they brought Jesus to Pontius Pilate, and they accused him, more false allegations again. They accused him for preventing the nation and forbidding to pay taxes to Caesar. And also, he said that he's Christ, with the king. So these were like 3 charges that Pilate could not say no. Then Pilate took him inside and kind of like started interrogating him. And he said, are you the king of Jews? And he said, as I am who I said I am. But then again, I don't think Pilate didn't really care. He found him innocent. They went out again in front of everyone, and he said, oh, this guy is innocent. I think everybody knows the story with Barabbas. So he was a murderer. And because it was Passover, it was, I guess, based on tradition that they could let one of the prisoners free. And they decided to let Barabbas free. It's crazy in my head that you've got a murderer and somebody that, well, they were trying to make him like a political and more involved accusations against him and blasphemy. And it's insane that people would actually back up Barabbas and not Jesus. Wild. So then Pilate found that Jesus was Galilean, so he sent him to Herod Antipas. Herod was very excited because he wanted to see a miracle, but Jesus didn't say a word to him. And then the interesting story is that Herod said that he's probably not guilty, he's innocent, and Pontius Pilate said the same. So even though they had kind of like confrontation before, hating them, that brought them closer. The fact that they both believed that he's innocent brought them closer. But that's another kind of like detail that nobody knows. Then Pilate asked, okay, what do you want me to do with Jesus? And they said, crucify him. And also another very interesting point is that Pilate's wife sent him an urgent personal message that said, please don't be involved with this man. I have really, really bad dreams and nightmares. I've been suffering. And he kind of disregarded his personal belief, but also his wife's, message. And then the Roman scouting started. I don't want to go through a lot of details and get too graphic, but they use this tool that is called flagrum. It's a terrible tool, anyways, to cause a lot of pain. Pretty much like your skin would come off, like your organs would show. The Jews limited strikes to 39, whereas Romans had no limit. It's whenever whoever was in charge will tell them to stop, which was insane. And then they humiliated him, they spat on him after beating him for, I don't even know how long. They put on his head the crown of thorns and gave him a beam, which is the wood from his cross, but like the horizontal only, which was about 70 to 90 pounds. And he had to carry it for like 600 meters straight uphill. And you can imagine for somebody that has been through 2 beatings, also the extreme agony in the Garden of Gethsemane, taking that beam for 600 meters was impossible. So he actually collapsed and he couldn't carry it anymore. Then they called somebody from the crowd called Simon, that in the beginning he didn't want to do anything with it, but as he picked it up and he was like carrying with Jesus, we don't know when it became from he didn't want to do anything with it to actually become part of it, and then he gave his life to Jesus also. Okay, now it's about 9 a.m. in the morning. He's on the top and they put him on the beam and they put the nails through. That's another interesting point. Not through palms. That's an artistic error. That was also like just verified afterwards after some historians. So they couldn't put them through the palms because the flesh would actually like tear apart and they will fall, because they almost knew what they were doing. They put it through the median nerve, and the pain that he felt was excruciating. They have actually given them a specific word to describe this kind of pain called kosalgia, which is another Greek word, by the way. Anyways, then they put the horizontal on top of the vertical post and they nailed his feet on that base. So they knew exactly what they were doing. Crucifixion was designed for extreme like pain and extreme humiliation. And every time he exhaled, the nails on his feet were pulling. And every time he inhaled, the nails through his wrist were pulling. So they used you actually breathing as a torture instrument. Brutal, insane. He was there on the cross and the soldiers were like still trying to insult him. And they said, how is it that, you can save others, but you cannot save yourself? And it's interesting because he literally didn't save himself so we can be saved. So they even like fulfilled the prophecy. And on the top, Pilate asked for a sign to be made, says, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. And the priest kind of like protested and they said, no, we want, I am the King of the Jews. That it was his declaration instead of the King of the Jews. That means that that's declared, that it's a fact. And Pilate said, you know what, I wrote what I wrote. I'm not dealing with this anymore. It was the first time he actually defended Jesus. We all know that Jesus was crucified next to two thieves. And one of them, again, kind of insulted him. He said, why don't you save yourself? And the other one repented. And he said, please, like when you go to heaven, please don't forget about me. And he said, no, you're going to be with me in paradise today. Not tomorrow, not in a week. Today. So you can see that like, this whole time, even though he was in excruciating pain, he cared about other people. There was a point when there was women that were crying and mourning about him, and he said, women, don't mourn about me, mourn about your kids and yourselves. He also looked at his mother, and instead of saying mother, he said, woman, behold is your son, and John, behold is your mother. Because back then, if you were a widow without a son, you were very unprotected. So he wanted to like take care of her, even though he was in his deathbed. He cared about his mom. Another thing that happened at 12 p.m. until 3, there was a complete darkness. So you can imagine noon time. It wasn't a solar eclipse, and it was verified by 2 historians later, because in order for a solar eclipse to happen, you need a new moon. But Passover was only during a full moon. So it was impossible, like astronomically, for that to have happened. Also, the longest solar eclipse that have been recorded is about 7 minutes, not 3 hours. Another phenomenon that occurred is earthquake. And a lot of temples got destroyed and apparently tombs were opened. What was interesting between those 3 hours, and I think that was why there was darkness. So Jesus didn't scream when he was betrayed, he was beat, he was spat, he was humiliated, he was whipped, he was nailed on the cross. He didn't scream. The only time that he cried out loud was in those 3 hours, because the biggest pain that he experienced was the separation from God. And he took that cup that we talked about earlier, it was our sins. So he took all the sins, all humanities, all of history. He drank that cup. till it was empty. And because when you're full of sin, you cannot be connected to God. He was separated for those 3 hours from God. And that was his more painful thing that he went through. And that's why he said, God, why have you forsaken me? Also, he didn't say Father, because for his whole 33 years, he would refer to God as Father. It's the first time. And not only that, he said it in Aramaic, not Latin, not Greek, not Hebrew. Because usually when you are in extreme pain and agony, you revert to your first language, and Aramaic was his mother tongue. Yeah, very interesting. This happened, the separation for 3 hours. He did this for us. He took all our sins. He got separated from God for us, so we don't have to ever be separated from him. And that's why we say by sacrifice. Then he said he was thirsty. They gave him a spoonful of vinegar, and he said tetelestai, which is a Greek word that means it's done, but it doesn't mean it's over. Tetelestai was a commercial term on receipts that means that the debt was fully paid. And that means that our debt was fully paid and completely canceled. And then his last words were, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. And that shows us that, he got reunited with God at that point. The cup was empty, the debt was paid, and he was back with God. And another thing that I've learned through, I watched a couple of videos and podcasts, is that the soldiers wanted to speed up the process, the death of the thieves. So they broke their legs. And when they went to Jesus, they saw that he was already dead. So one of the soldiers took a spear and pierced his side. And then blood and water was kind of flashed out, and it was sprayed on that soldier's face. We know that he had some vision issues, but after that, he got his vision back. And then he knew that was a miracle, and then he started believing, and he devoted himself to Christianity. And years later, he got arrested by Roman soldiers. They blinded him, but he didn't care. He said, I don't need my eyes to see the truth. It was very interesting. That's a lot of information. I wanted to know exactly what happened, and it seems that it doesn't matter back then. Today is the same thing. It's power trip, it's politics. People don't care. But his lessons, even though he was on, experiencing death, he cared more about us than himself. And that's the whole thing of wearing the cross, symbolize sacrifice, which is the ultimate expression of love. So that's all from me today. Hope you found a lot of interesting points. I'm hoping that you can get closer to God, creating a more intimate and personal relationship with God. I'll see you guys at the next one.